afternoon. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Central Kane County Forum, Community Forum. My name is Patty Lackman, and I am Voter Service Chair. Today's Community Forum, am I too close? No. See, I wear hearing aids, so let me just tell you how they're echoing in my ear. Today's Community Forum will address the referendum question on the ballot relative to the issue of home rule in Batavia. The forum will be moderated by Miriam Judah from the Citizen Advocacy Center, a nonpartisan, nonprofit legal organization. The forum will include representatives from B4RG and Vote No Home Rule. Ms. Judah will open with information relative to home rule and her particular agency. Then each side will be given 10 minutes to provide information relative to their particular position on home rule. This will be followed by questions from the audience. Only written questions will be used, and the questions will be reviewed for appropriateness and clarity by question reviewers from the League. We have Susan Russo up here, our in-house counsel. And we have questions being picked up by Lona Steele and Terry Allen. And questions will be asked by our moderator. Each side will get 2 minutes to respond. Time will be kept by our timekeeper, Lynn Steele, right up here, who will hold up his paddles so people can see. He will notify the panelists when they hit the 1 minute mark and when they hit the 30-second mark, and then the stop sign will go up. The panelists will be allowed to finish their sentence, but not a paragraph. The panelists will then be allowed, or not all questions will be asked of the panelists, because some of the questions will be similar and they will be put together by Ms. Russo, since many of you will have similar or the same questions. I want to tell you a little bit about the League. We're a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation of citizens in government. We never endorse a candidate, and the League of Women Voters sponsors events such as this one so that voters are educated and informed on the issues. This is done in an open and unbiased setting. The League has very strict rules about how to conduct such events. And the League is asking people participating tonight to make sure that the audience at this forum, or those who see it on TV, or read about it in the newspapers, are able to learn your particular views. To that end, we want to hear views from you and not what you feel your opponent's views are. They have the time to give their own views. I think that will benefit people who are interested in finding out about home rule. And should you stray from this, we will interrupt you and re-ask the question. Please turn off all cell phones and refrain from making verbal comments to the individuals on the panel. And today's forum is being filmed by BATV, and I see that we have Mark Foster from the Chronicle here. So we are well covered. With no further ado, I will give you to Miriam Judah.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for inviting me to Patty and the League of Women Voters. I love your community center, it's beautiful. And thanks for all of you for coming out to hear about the pros and cons of home rule from people who are passionate on both sides of the debate. I want to start off by describing what Citizen Advocacy Center does. I did leave several brochures and materials over there if you'd like to pick any up. Citizen Advocacy Center is a nonprofit, nonpartisan legal organization, and if I could just borrow or talk and say ditto, we don't take any sides on any candidates, and we don't have a stake in this issue. We do a lot of civic education, so this is part of our civic education program. We're interested in providing education and information so that those who participate in government decision-making and vote and all the rest have the information that they need so that they can make an informed choice. We have a lot of other programming, so I don't want to belabor it, but we help public officials, journalists, educators, students, the general public. Our model is community lawyering. So we do a lot of community organizing, and we help folks with just answering legal questions, technical questions. I like to say A to Z, animal law to zoning, and everything in between. So if government does it or attempts to do it, it's in our purview. So we focus on two things to achieve our mission of building democracy, and that is civic participation and government accountability, where those two meet. So I thought I'd give a little bit about what home rule is to set a little bit of context. It's a legal concept, and in 1970 at the Constitutional Convention, the delegates added it to the Constitution, and I wasn't there, but thinking, I think, from what I've read, was that public officials in our local governments wanted to spend their time serving their communities and didn't want to go to Springfield to lobby to get exceptions to laws that applied to all municipalities. And so the concept of home rule was to alleviate the elected officials in these localities from having to go to Springfield and lobby, and they can instead create laws and regulations and create taxes without having to visit Springfield. Now 1970 is different from now, so I'm not sure how relevant that explanation is today, especially since a lot of the entities have lobbyists that tends to be in Springfield anyway. And if any of you have anything to add about what you know about how home rule came to be, I'd love to hear it. So the really important thing about home rule in Illinois is that it's such a broad concept and courts have interpreted the language very broadly. And that's because of the language in the Constitution. The Illinois Constitution has really, really broad language in describing what home rule authority municipalities and counties may enjoy. It says that they may exercise any power and perform any function. So that's a lot. And then pertaining to its government and affairs. Those are really broad terms, government and its affairs. And of course, it goes on to mention that regulation and taxing and incurring debt are part and parcel of the authority. So that language before the courts has been interpreted to basically allow home rule entities, mostly municipalities, to create any kind of law or regulation or tax in any creative form that they can. So funding mechanisms that some of you might be aware of are home rule municipalities and counties may increase sales tax. They may increase property taxes beyond the tax cap, known as PTEL. They can do that without going to referendum. They can increase borrowing and use general obligation funds without going to referendum, approval for a GO bond. They can increase bond debt beyond statutory limits. And again, it increases creative finance options for these communities. So there are differences also in how certain taxes may be used between a home rule and a non-home rule municipality. So for example, with sales tax, home rule entities may increase sales tax without limit, without going to referendum. And a non-home rule must seek the voter permission for sales tax, and they're limited to a 1% cap. Hotel, motel taxes, a home rule community may use the taxes collected from that anyhow they want. They can put it in the general fund, but non-home rule municipalities are restricted by law to only use that funding for tourism. We talked a little bit about the PTEL limits or the tax cap. It ties the rate of inflation, it ties increases of the property taxes to the rate of inflation of 5%, whichever is less. And again, home rule entities can increase property taxes beyond the tax limit without going to referendum, whereas non-home rule entities cannot tax beyond the property tax cap without voter approval. So really the question that we think that the community should be thinking about in evaluating home rule is, first of all, collecting information about how your municipality is utilizing its home rule power. What ordinances has it passed since getting the home rule status that it passed pursuant to its home rule authority? A lot of times when these issues come up in communities that we're called to come in and help educate people about what home rule does, a question arises about whether the folks who are going to be voting on this issue, whether they trust their legislators. And some people think that voting for your legislators at elections is strong enough, and that it might not, that folks don't feel like they need to go to referendum for every increase beyond the limits that state law sets for non-home rule municipalities, and other people might prefer that there's more opportunities to input and that there's more control in the community. So you have to ask yourself if you believe in the value of home rule, or if you believe that, I guess those values might be found elsewhere. And so these are the kinds of things that you have to evaluate. So I wanted to give you some home rule regulation examples. Probably all of you are familiar with the Cook County soda tax. That was really popular in the news because it seemed so crazy that they put a tax on soda. And no other entity had done that. And again, Cook County is the only county in Illinois that has home rule powers. Although counties may also elect to be home rule law, but that's the only one that's had it so far. Chicago had an ordinance challenge that went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court, and that ordinance allowed condominium unit owners to inspect the condo association's finances. So it gave them the authority to actually go and check the financial books of the condo association. And this actually was litigated again all the way through the Illinois Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that Chicago definitely had the authority under its home rule power to pass that regulation. Addison increased city inspection to rental units. They had some racial discrimination or housing discrimination lawsuits, and in the wake of that, they used their home rule powers to include a number of mandatory inspections to multi-unit dwellings. Excuse me. Wheaton expedited the use of eminent domain, and like many other municipalities that have home rule, increased the sales tax, added a gasoline tax, added a real estate transfer tax. A lot of times you'll see real estate associations are against home rule because they don't want those real estate transfer taxes. In Elmhurst, where CAC is located, our headquarters, Elmhurst uses it to license the sidewalk vendors. It also increased the sales tax and added real estate transfer taxes, gas tax, and food and beverage tax. In DeKalb, they established a landlord-tenant council to deal with student rentals. So again, there's these creative ways in which these municipalities are able to address problems. Interestingly, and I haven't read the case, in 2004, St. Charles imposed a lumber tax and was sued, and they actually lost in court. I don't know if that's just an outlier. I need to go read the case to see why, because again, home rule is so broad, practically any home rule ordinance is going to be upheld by a court. And so it also diminishes the power of the people then to hold governments accountable if they're home rule, because again, that power is going to be interpreted so broadly, given large latitude. So I think that's all I want to say about home rule. So I guess at this point, I don't know if you guys want to do straws.
I'll go first.
You'll go first? Okay. All right.
Well, that introduction was a little extreme. So the question is, how does it apply to Batavia, right? So we have no soda tax here. No one's going to tax your lumber.
Right closer to your mouth.
I'm sorry, no one's going to tax your lumber. There is no soda tax here. And this is the problem we've been having, is that people have been reaching this to levels where it does not apply to Batavia anymore. We're talking about coulda, woulda, and shoulda, which is not reality of what we're dealing with here. Right? So I have 10 minutes, so I think we're starting to ticker now. So let me go ahead and get started here. So the question is, let's just kick it off like this, because we know the people who are involved, we know the players. So how do we end up here, right? And I think it really gets down to who is city government, right? And this gets down to the question of who do you trust, what is actually happening versus what could possibly happen, and where do we go forward, right? So city government is our friends and neighbors. Okay, so Batavia has 14 alderpersons for 27,000 people. That's one for every 2,000 residents. By comparison, St. Charles has 10 alderpersons for 34,000, one for every 3,400 residents. And Naperville has 8 alderpersons for 142,000 people, one for every 17,750 residents. If you want to take it to the state level, we're at 3 state reps for 2,400, so one representative for 80,000 residents. So Batavia is highly represented, which there is no problem getting people's voice input into city government. It happens every day, every week, every hour. Our aldermen are paid $55,000 a year. Our mayor gets $30,000 or $29,000 a year. They do not get a pension, and when you take down how hours they spend on this, they make less than a cashier at Jewel, right? I mean, these are truly volunteers who care about the community, who take in all your input. Half the alderpersons are up for election every 2 years. There's plenty of churn on the council. We're very transparent. Everything's posted online. Archived, available to easily searched. There is no weirdness here. If you want to know why something happened, who talked about it, why it's proposed, it's at your fingertips. Go to Google, go to citybatavia.net, you'll have your answer. There's no need to call out to a champion or call out to an apostle. The answer is right at your fingertips. Additionally, if you want to talk to your alderman directly, again, we have the best representation of any city in the area. One alderman rep for 2,000 people versus an extreme for everybody. You can pretty much get a hold of them right away through either email, phone, email alerts sent to you over social media, and even direct Facebook and social media reach out. So what we're saying here is that our government, when they make a decision, it truly reflects the will of the people. It's not some bizarre, there's no monster in a cave, there's no gorilla in the room. We have such a highly represented government that they're able to actually get people are able to get their viewpoint out immediately and right away. Okay? It's important to say that because what we heard here was a soda tax. A soda tax would make it past the first meeting. We all call it ridiculous right away. Right? A lumber tax, it never would happen. Right? I mean, but a lot of these, because we've seen other communities abuse home rule, we forget that we have not. And past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. We've had home rule for 9 years. You are living in a home rule community. Everything around the increased governance, the increased taxing options, and all that has been available to you, and you've gotten comfortable with it. Okay, so it's our everyday, it has been for nearly a decade. So let's not forget that. There's been no soda tax here over the past 10 years. There's been no lumber tax here over the past 10 years. There's been no bizarre sort of conversations around some bizarre taxing mechanism over the past 10 years. It's been used rightly and judiciously. Okay. So thank you for explaining what home rule is. So basically what home rule is, it allows communities to go ahead and actually propose any sort of law which is not covered by the state constitution or does not go against it. Okay, so it gives us a little flexibility which we would not have without it. And the question is, how do we get it? Well, quite frankly, as mentioned earlier, if you get more than 25,000 people from population, you get it automatically. Unfortunately, we fell short on the 2000 census by 1,200 people, so we went ahead and did a special census in 2000, I want to say it was 2009, and we actually received home rule. Okay, so we've had home rule for about 10 years. Okay, so going on, what have we done with home rule? Again, not the weird parts, the good parts. Right? So we're able to shift parts of our tax burden to people who don't live in Batavia. You go down Randall Road, what do you see? A lot of gas stations, you see a lot of restaurants, you see an occasional liquor store. So what did we do? We said, let's shift our taxing burden from the citizens of Batavia. Let's shift part of it to those driving down Randall, driving down 31, driving down 35. When those folks trip through our community, let them contribute to our taxes, our tax base, right? We're offloading our tax burden to people who are out of town. And what that does for us is allows us to not raise property taxes as high, not actually incur as much debt as we run our city. Also, what we've done is what we're going to call crime-free housing. Passed in 2011, it allows for unit inspection, lease amendments, greater landlord-police cooperation, which is important, applicant screening, and other legislation for apartment buildings 8 units or greater. So we have 9 units under crime-free housing legislation, which is only allowed in home rule, which we'll lose without home rule. And as a result of this, calls for service have been down by 40% for complexes under governance. While calls for service have been steady citywide, residential rentals have picked up the slack. So we have, like a smart missile, targeted our problem properties, corrected the issue, created greater police and government relationships, allowed a greater sharing of information. As a result, there's been a direct result to your safety of your children, and quality of life for tenants. Because we like to talk about tenants being, we like to talk about ourselves as seeing the burden as homeowners, but the fact is those people who live next door to problem units saw the greater benefit. So it's been an act in kind for the entire city. So we talk about 40% reduction, but it's not the whole story. So we talk about crime-free housing. What we see when we talk about what actually matters, felony arrests for drugs and violence. It's fun to talk about issues that are misdemeanors. Somebody had a DUI, which is serious, but quite frankly, it can be a misdemeanor. So somebody, for whatever reason, shoplifted, stole a candy bar from a convenience store. It goes on the target as, quite frankly, a call for service. But does it actually have a material impact on our safety? And my argument would be a call for service is just a call for service. What we really care about are felonies regarding drugs and violence. When we look at those numbers, thanks to the crime-free housing program, allowed under home rule, we have seen a reduction from 53 arrests for felony and drugs to 9 for pre and post home rule. 53 to 9, a reduction of 600%. We look at, there's been additional similar size reduction among all house types in particular for felony arrests for drugs and violence. So if I look at a residential rental, a homeowner, a roommate situation, the fact is there's been a reduction across the board thanks to crime-free housing and the greater relationship it allows between police and landlords. And I have a story, quite frankly. I've lived around these properties that have been problem properties, and I'll never forget the frustration when I talked to police and I said, hey, you know what? There was an arrest next to me in a rental unit. Why can't you tell the landlord? And I was told by the police, quite frankly, I'm sorry, we can't tell you. It's against the law. Okay? Most bizarre, simple thing, quite frankly, with the crime-free housing legislation, it went from we can't to we can and we will. Okay? So it's just been a real material impact on quality of life. Now let's talk about taxes. Okay? So as you know, as I mentioned earlier, without home rule, property taxes go up either the CPI or 5% per year, whichever is lower. Okay, so what has happened in Batavia? Okay, so believe it or not, property taxes went below the legally allowed limit for the years 2011 and 2014. Most communities which are not home rule just up the property taxes by legally allowed amount, like verbatim. Every year they're going up, however legally we can. Okay, so we went down, we went lower from 2011 to 2014. We actually went down by a significant amount. 2013, 2015, and 2016, and we were above for the years 2010, 2012, 2017, and 2018. There are stories among why we went up for all those years we can talk to. I have 1 minute left. So what we're going to talk to, what I'm going to leave is the damage we'll do to the community. Okay, so we will lose some home rule some taxes that were passed under home rule. Okay, given the level of time I have left, I'm going to talk to the 1.9 million we'll lose guaranteed. We lose home rule today, we have to go to referendum, and guess what? We have to get a referendum passed to get that 1.9 million. What that's going to result in is a loss of 1.9 million, which boils down to 22 times the $83,000 we have paid more over the past 9 years. This entire movement, this entire conversation is boiling over each of us paying, in my pocket, 96 cents per year. Okay? So we're going to lose 22 times that, 1.9 million, if we lose home rule. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind because we're going to hear a long conversation about it. How much they care about your wallet and how much of your dollar. I don't think they do.
All right, thank you. I tried to present home rule as neutrally as I could, but the fact of the matter is it is broad. And I want to reiterate that it is about whether you trust your legislators. It was just presented, given some facts about the history of home rule use. Those are the kinds of facts that you want to consider and look at the sources, and we'll talk about that just with the questions. But basically, home rule, one of the issues that people have is that your legislators change, elected officials change. So some home rule entities have actually put limits on their own home rule authority through ordinances, which are somewhat symbolic because home rule entities are allowed to violate their own ordinances without having any consequence because they were ordinances that they created themselves. So courts have said that where home rule entities have violated those home rule ordinances, there was no consequence. So they could pass ordinances to say we're going to limit our legislators' home rule powers. We're going to limit the home rule powers to this and this and this. But of course, they don't have to then pay attention to that ordinance. And I do also want to mention that the General Assembly reserves the right, I did forget to say this, the General Assembly reserves the right to legislate issues on a statewide basis and to reserve the right that home rule entities cannot then interfere with that state legislation. And that takes a positive application to home rule entities in the state statute. So you would have to see in the state statute a clear statement that this applies to all entities in the state and there's no exception. So I think that's all I wanted to say. There's one other thing I wanted to mention is that when it comes to authority in Illinois, the authority of governments to do public business, courts are going to interpret laws that provide that authority very narrowly. So if an individual were to have the opportunity through statute or otherwise to sue an entity, and they're going to have to look at the municipality or county's authority to do whatever the issue is, they're going to look at that state statute very narrowly and look at things very narrowly. But where home rule is implicated or invoked, when the status of an entity is home rule, that narrow application is no longer part and parcel of the analysis. It's now this really broad view of home rule is because of the way it's written in the Illinois Constitution, which would need to have a constitutional amendment to change. And that's all I wanted to say. So let's move on to the other side.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for watching on VATV. What is home rule? Home rule is about power and money and who controls it. With home rule, the state takes the power from the people and gives it to the city council. Without home rule, the people have the power to make decisions through referendum. The caps and limits the state puts in place are for the protection of the people and are generally sufficient for the day-to-day workings of government. In 2009, Batavia got home rule status because our population hit 25,000 people. The citizens didn't ask for it. We didn't get to vote on it. Many Batavians, up until the last few months, didn't even know we had it. So what's the big deal? Why this referendum? Shall the city of Batavia cease to be a home rule unit? We think it's time people learn about home rule and time for the people of Batavia to decide if they want to end it or keep it. The longer a city has home rule, the more entrenched the home rule taxes and debt become, and the harder it is for people to do anything about it. You hear the city crying the sky will fall if they lose home rule, and yet the home rule taxes they would lose are neither very bold nor very great yet. There are millions of dollars of projects being considered in the city. With home rule in place, the council alone decides what gets done, and they send the bill to the taxpayers who have to shut up and pay it. If they make a bad decision in issuing bonds, it cannot be undone by electing new aldermen. If the people vote yes to end home rule, the people will have a part in the decision-making process. We will be able to vote through referendum on what is important to us. What are we willing to pay for? What taxes do we want? We will be able to control the power and size of government. We will be able to, in some measure, control our taxes. In a recent Daily Herald article titled "A Snapshot of Wasteful Spending by Local Governments in Illinois," it says a new poll conducted by the Center for State Policy found that 53% of current Illinois residents want to leave the state. The number one reason why? High taxes. Research has shown that people are more willing to pay taxes when they trust their elected officials and see their valuable services in return for their tax dollars. Eliminating wasteful spending is essential and will go a long way toward regaining the public's trust. If voters repeal home rule, with the limits back in place, the city would have to prioritize and work to cut wasteful spending. It would help build trust.
Here's a quick snapshot of wasteful spending and why I don't trust the city with home rule. The city bought the Baptist Church in July 2005 for public roadway purposes to take out the jog on Route 25. Then about 15 months later, voted not to pursue road improvement based on a jog study costing $225,000. To this date, despite numerous contacts with IDOT and the city, no jog study can be produced. If the city was doing proper planning, how could the city spend $700,000 for a building and then 15 months later, based on an apparently non-existent study, decide they were wrong? In 2009, a Friedman Company study said to keep the historic Baptist Church building. The city allowed an historic church to sit there and deteriorate at taxpayers' expense. I guess the church lost its historic status once Shodeed wanted the property. Now the church and 3 more properties have been purchased and demolished at taxpayers' expense for the Shodeed 1 North Washington project. In the spring of 2015, I had a conversation with the owner of one of the properties that was needed for the Shodeed project to move forward. He told me the city was harassing him so much that he had to hire an attorney. Firm offers for his property were made in the spring of 2015. Citizens had never heard of the Shodeed 1 North project at that time, and yet negotiations had offered to buy at 2 to 4 times the market value presented to these property owners. These were not arm's length transactions. In May of 2016, the president of Shodeed Corporation had an executive session meeting with council members behind closed door. Just a few months after that, at the closed meetings, 3 properties were bought by the city at taxpayers' benefit for the benefit of Shodeed 1 North Washington project. One of the properties was purchased for $600,000 without an appraiser ever going inside to look at the property. The memo to purchase the property said there was a committee vote the week before. I challenged this, and the minutes had to be corrected because there was no committee vote the minute before. We, the taxpayers, footed the bill to purchase the properties, moved the owner of one or another to stay rent-free, and then demolish the buildings and mitigate contamination on the property. All this to give the property to Shodeed for $10. Without an appraisal, the city took another property off the tax rolls by paying $1.25 million to demolish the building and pay the property for parking during the Shodeed project. Again, a review of committee minutes proved there was no vote taken prior to the council meeting. This is a short, by no means complete history of actions taken by the city we have trusted with home rule powers.
reminded me, I've attended council and POW meetings for years. I've reviewed contracts, made suggestions, and pointed out possible problems and errors to council members. I reviewed the budgets in detail and have noticed that since Batavia got home rule, we are paying more money in taxes and fees and getting less benefit from it. The council seems more concerned with feathering the nests of developers and building downtown than it is with caring for the needs of other residents in Batavia. Despite expensive studies done even before home rule and primary recommendations that storm sewers be separated, residents have had to endure flooding, sometimes less than adequate street repair, and admissions by our hardworking public works director that certain maintenance was not being done. Corporate welfare has been paramount to the city. Susan Stark said, we can do this without home rule. So my question is, why do we need home rule? We got along just fine without it before 2009. We have 5 TIF districts in Batavia, 2 of which have been extended for 12 years, 12 more years after 23 years of redirecting tax dollars from our schools, library, and other taxing bodies. The 5th is for the apparent sole benefit of Shodini. Batavia paid over $2 million for 3 properties that were producing $36,000 in property taxes. For a minimum of 23 years, our schools, library, and other taxing bodies will have to forego the possible increase in property values and the taxes generated by it for the benefit of Shodini, in addition to the proposed issuance of general obligation bonds without taxpayer input. The city pledges future revenues, but who pays in the meantime? The city says sales and gas taxes are paid by people outside of Batavia, but it cannot tell us exactly how much is generated by outsiders. Batavians also pay sales and gas taxes in Geneva, Aurora, and St. Charles, so no matter how you look at it, Batavians are paying for the increase in taxes. We also have to give the state some of that tax money because the state charges for collecting and redistributing the tax dollars. According to the 2018 budget, real estate taxes and fees for water, sewer, and gas and sales taxes have been raised and are proposed to be raised again for 2019 and several more years ahead. This was done before our home rule petition was circulated. The city claims without home rule, our bond rating will be less favorable. Bond ratings are more a measure of fiscal health than home rule. It's a measure of outstanding debt management, economic base, and financial performance. Under home rule, the city's electric revenue bond rating had a negative outlook in 2014. 2 cities with the highest bond ratings in the state do not have home rule, Lake Zurich and Clarendon Hills. The city claims it will lose revenue without home rule. Maybe, but the citizens will have more control over how their money is spent and definitely more control in how much is borrowed and for what purpose. Remember, every dollar borrowed by the city is paid for by the taxpayer or the ratepayer, no matter how the city phrases or promotes it. Did you want to finish it?
Oh, I just finished a quick summary. This is a short by no means complete history of actions taken by the city. We have trusted with home rule powers. And don't forget the purchase of the Prairie State coal plant that cost us dearly at $250 million. Do you want to trust the city to issue $17 million in bonds without your permission?
Okay. I do want to mention that there's another limit besides the General Assembly stating in its state laws that its statute that it's passing is going to be applicable to home rule entities. Another limit on home rule power is that home rule entities cannot tax occupations or income or earnings. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and it escapes me. So let's just jump into the questions. So the first question I think I can answer: if a city is home rule, can the city ask?
Yeah, it's not.
Yes, we're doing it. Oh, you don't get that?
You start further.
I don't think they can answer that. It's a legal answer. Okay. So we'll start with the sources question. So may I ask you all, what sources are you using for the data you are using to support your position?
I'm
The questions
There are 10 questions. She will deliver the questions. We will try to get through all of them that are up there before.
So could
So
you ask the
let's all
question again,
calm
please?
down and listen. Can I give you?
Sure, yeah.
the
What
question
sources are you using for the
Each
data?
side gets 2 minutes.
To answer each
Response.
question.
And you're retiming that and using
Yes.
different cards, wonderful. So what sources are you using to support your position?
Okay, my sources have been the City of Batavia budgets and the attendance at city council meetings. I have the midterm financial reports from Peggy Colby. I have all the ordinances. I have a whole bag of stuff somewhere here.
We have FOIA requests.
We have FOIA requests, and we go on the city's website and get the information. And as I said, I've attended a lot of city council meetings and a lot of committee of the whole meetings. So I get the information right from the horse's mouth, the city council, and from the documents that they have in their agendas. And they print the document, you can print out the documents that back up the things that they're saying on their agendas. So that's where I get my information.
So we keep up to date, and we download all the attachments for the council meetings. Here's the latest TIF report, 114 pages. I don't know whether you would have bothered to read that, but we read it, and that's just an example of the data and how we get it. There's lots of data, and I think you'll find everything accurate.
And the city is actually very good about putting a lot of their information out. There's a lot of documents that you can search and you can find information.
All right, your turn. So what sources have you used to support your position?
Well, a lot of the same sources of information. First off, I want to stress that the financial numbers I've been using come from Peggy Colby, who's won awards for public reporting of financial matters, pretty much consistently for the past 10 years. Also FOIA requests, Chief of Police, his information that he publishes, as well as some information vendors. I work in analytics, so I am familiar with information vendors and pull the same sources that we pull for some of our clients. So really an awesome broad range of information. What you're going to find is that a lot of us pull from some source of information. We just choose to come to different conclusions based on the reality that we're faced with. Mine is very much fact-based. I won't speak to it to the testimony. There's no interpretation involved. A lot of things that were just said don't involve home rule. Mine all do. So a lot of the same sources. City of Batavia is great. They're very transparent. And it's a credit to them that you can have two different sides. We quote the same sources of information.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask is the question I was going to answer, but I'll ask you guys and see if you know the answer. If a city is home rule, can the city ask the voters via referendum before large expenditures are made instead of just making a decision? I'll start with you.
Well, the answer is always it depends. The city can do things like issue a 2% tax on all restaurants without going to referendum. They can do that. They can do it right out of hand. And quite frankly, the opposition of me has proposed doing that to fill the hole that we're going to have through the loose home rule, and it will be a gigantic hole. Keep in mind. We can still do TIFs without home rule. That doesn't have to go to referendum to do that. We already have 5 of them. We're a 150-year-old town. We need TIFs. We need redevelopment. You can't avoid that obstacle coming our way. So the answer is yes. They can still do major expenditures without going to referendum. It's just the reality of it. And some of the things that go to referendum doesn't mean you're going to get the same quality that you're going to get with home rule. So for instance, I can do kind of sort of a crime-free housing program. Guess what? You're not going to see the same results without home rule because you can't legally do the same things, right? So we've got to be careful because we talk about referendum like it's a cure-all. It's not. The dam, we decided to take that to a referendum, we lost, and guess what? We're going to be on the hook for 10 to 12 billion to replace that dam. The dam's a fiscal thing. The state was going to pay for it. It was going to be awesome. We took a referendum, guess what? We got smashed. And now guess what? We legally own it, so we're going to have to pay for it. So as much as we're going to talk about wanting to save us money, they're going to cost us money through referendum to 10 to 12 billion to replace that dam. The second bridge, we don't talk about it, with the traffic. We're so sick of seeing that traffic. Guess what? That was the referendum too, back in 2000. We voted that down too. So, referendum, it's not the cure.
There are limits. The state puts limits on cities without home rule. One of those is for large expenditure general obligation bonds, the kind that would go directly on top of the property taxes without a cap. Those would have to go to referendum. With home rule right now, the city can put out an advisory referendum, but there's nothing that the people could do to force a binding referendum. Without home rule, you can put the citizens can put together a binding referendum that binds the city to the results of the referendum. And there are certain things. There are certain kind of bonds passed for, like the wastewater treatment plant. That one was ordered by the EPA, and so that one would be done without referendum. We had no say in that, even if we did not have it.
Certain bonds can be issued without a referendum, but the question is, do you want to have a say in what bonds are issued? Do you want to have a say in how much taxes you're going to pay for some of these things? And yes, the city can do certain things without home rule, but, you know, do you want to give the city as much power as they have right now to raise taxes and to do all these things without any input from the rest of us? We voted down the bridge because we had the ability to do that. With home rule, we would not have the ability to say, no, we don't want it.
All right. Jen, what non-tax authority will the city lose if home rule is abolished?
We will lose everything that's not covered in the Illinois State Constitution, which means we're going to face future problems which we don't know about yet, which we're going to lose the ability to address. I can't even think of them yet, it's not even on the radar. What we're going to lose today is the crime-free housing program, which has had a direct benefit to our safety, to the level of crime that exists within the city. It has made the lives of tenants in our 9 apartment buildings under governance both much more beneficial, much more safe haven for their children, and it's done nothing but good for this community. We've been able to do more with less. We're down 5 police officers. We now have 40 police officers out of 45 that we had. Home rule has allowed us to take those police officers who are dedicated to sworn policing these apartment units and apply them to the rest of the community. So we're safer overall, with less effort, with less money. Home rule has saved us money again and again, and we keep coming back to this conversation. And now we're talking about a budget hole, which is unbelievable. So I don't want anyone to leave this conversation thinking that home rule has been nothing but good for us, from both a practical perspective in your day-to-day lives, a financial perspective of what you pay in taxes, and what you're going to expect to pay in taxes in the future, as well as your right and your voice within your government. Batavia has the most representation per city in the entire area by far. We gotta stop it.
So what non-tax authority will the city lose if it abolishes home rule?
Well, they would lose the crime-free housing. That's a home rule authority. However, there are nuisance ordinances that do much of the same thing as the crime-free housing.
They do not.
The police will not stop policing. They will not stop. They will not stop talking to the different to the apartment owners. The police will continue to do their job as well as they have been. The crime as a whole in King County and in the nation actually has gone down significantly since 2000. And it has dropped with and without home rule. The first year of the crime-free housing ordinance in Batavia, they actually had a murder, an attempted murder, which they had not had previously. So it doesn't necessarily, crime-free housing is not the panacea for all of the woes of the town. There's a lot of things that go into it. And King County touts the drop in crime as well as Batavia, and that's not due to home rule.
And we reviewed the crime-free housing documentation when Chief Shiloh was the Chief of Police in Batavia. We gave him recommendations, and the fact of the matter is we have laws that can be enforced and will be enforced regardless of whether we have crime-free housing. And the statistics on crime-free housing and on all of the housing, if you will look In the city's budget for 2018, page A1, they have all the statistics. If you read at the beginning of the budget, there's a whole letter in the beginning of the budget that tells you about the tax increases and the proposed increases and the number of people they are going to hire. And we haven't even done the November 19, or the 2019 budget yet. That's due to come out in November. So I urge you all to read the budget.
The next question is, by what percentage has Batavia's bond of debt increased since becoming home rule?
I have no idea. And the reason why I say that is because Batavia is a 150-year-old town. We have to do projects. There's no way around it. We've mentioned Sordine a couple times, nothing to do with home rule. Okay? It's a blighted area. It's an empty field. We're east side of downtown. There's nothing there. I mean, it's hilarious. And you're like, how did this happen, right? So what we need to do is we need to do projects through our TIF districts, which does not involve your property taxes, which involves borrowing from future taxes that are going to come from the project being completed to do these things, right? What we need to acknowledge is that we have things like wooden sewers now. I mean, we're an old community. We're going to have to do these projects, whether it be the sewers, whether it be the sanitation, whether it be the new bridge, whether it be the rehabbing the east side of downtown. There's no way around this. If we want to maintain our home values, maintain our quality of life, maintain what name you, we're going to have to do these projects. There's nothing's going to stop it, regardless of what governance we're under. So under home rule, what we've been able to do is use all this great citizen input that we have. We're very transparent, telegraph what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Let's talk about Chodine for 1 minute. I was at nearly every meeting involving Chodine. It was an 18-month process. When people pretend that it just popped up last week, I have to laugh because I was at all the meetings, right? I mean, these things are known, they're there, they're coming down the pipe, and we need to do them, right? Bonds are not bad. That's the part we got to understand. Bonds are not bad. We're a 150-year-old town. We're gonna have to do things. There's no way around it.
So what percentage has Batavia's bond of debt increased since becoming home rule?
Well, bonds are not, we can't say that there's been what percentage of an increase, because bonds are issued annually. And if you will look in the budget, there's a debt service section in the budget that lists all the bonds. And when people say that TIF isn't tax dollars, I have to tell you, they'll say TIFs are really not, they're hard to understand. They're really not. Every person who has a property in a TIF district has their property tax value frozen for the TIF purpose at a certain amount. That does not mean that those people are not paying 100% of the real estate taxes. All that means is that any increase in the real estate taxes that these people would have paid is going directly into a TIF fund. So that's taking money away from the schools, the parks, the library, and the rest of the taxing bodies, and the city gets to redistribute it to further the TIF district and further what they want. That those funds are restricted, but still they get to spend that money, and the schools and the parks and the rest of them don't get it for 23 years.
And that will dovetail into what bonds that the city has not, we don't know what has passed, has issued in the past, but will it issue? They've already agreed to issue $16 million in general obligation bonds, backed by the full faith and credit of your property taxes for the Chodine project. And those have not been issued yet, and because of home rule, if they get issued with home rule, we cannot vote on them, we cannot put them to referendum. Without home rule, we could put those general obligation bonds to referendum, $16 million plus interest.
All right, so there's a bunch of questions about the One Washington Place development, and some of them are similar. So folks are asking if, they're stating about how the One Washington Place is approved under the TIF statute, and what does this have to do with home rule authority? And could the One North Washington project move forward without home rule? And related to that, could TIF districts happen without home rule?
So first off, the city is 8% of property taxes. Nothing to do with school district, I sort of mentioned here, nothing to do with park district. The city gets a little less than park district for property taxes, okay, 8%. For me, it's $620 a year that I pay to the city for taxes. City's a service-based organization. They pay for my fire, they pay for my police, they pay for my maintenance. Trust me, I've used all three of those services to the max. My wife would attest to it, right? So the fact is, I get value out of the city, all right? Again, 8% of my property taxes, not 100%. Nothing the city does impacts the school district. That's a lot. We gotta say that stuff. Okay. The show need can happen without home rule. Okay. It's a TIF district. It's a legal tool provided to cities that are old as Batavia who need redevelopment. We need redevelopment. There's no way around this. Okay. We've seen communities to the south of us, and to the north of us, that did not do redevelopment, and we've seen the consequences they've gone. Right. We're not going to do that. We're going to do the redevelopment. Okay. When it comes to show need is a trigger word, okay? If it's a different developer, maybe we may not hear the same sort of thing. Here, show need, we think bad. We think, God, what's that Jimmy Stewart movie, Time Before Christmas, or whatever that guy's name is, I forgot. Maybe I should think of it. But the fact is, show need, he's a developer who took the risk, put the money up front. We have legally wrapped that guy up so many ways that if he were to even walk away from the project tomorrow, we have bonds behind them that we can still complete the project. Okay? We need to stop pretending that we have given this guy all this money for nothing. We've given him money to provide for a city parking garage. We have put legally structure around him so he can't walk away without us getting some sort of compensation and still finish the project. There's a redevelopment we need to do. Our east side is empty. It is physically empty. You need to drive by. You need to see it after this is done. Go drive down the street. Thank you.
So I'm going to repeat the question. So could the Washington project move forward without home rule? What does the fact that it was approved under the TIF statute have to do with home rule authority? And could TIF districts happen without home rule?
TIF districts could happen without home rule, and it has happened without home rule. As for the Shonin project, where home rule comes in is those general obligation bonds, the 16 million general obligation bonds. With home rule, the city council passes it and it goes through. Without home rule, the citizens can mount a referendum and have the people vote on it, so that you, the voters, will be able to vote whether or not that project goes through. Now, being a TIF district, they could also issue TIF bonds instead of general obligation bonds. And those TIF bonds would not be allowed to be put to referendum, but they come at a higher interest rate, and they also come with, in order to issue TIF bonds, it would have to come with an independent third-party assessment, an evaluation of feasibility of the project, so that whether that can happen or not, we don't know. And we do not know if Shonin would want to pay that extra money, and given that they canceled he said it's very, very tight, and that's why they got rid of the retail space on Wilson Street, because he said it's not making enough money. I really doubt that it would go through with without the general obligation bonds and with TIF bonds. So that's the difference. We could, general obligation bonds, we can put those to referendum. TIF bonds, we don't.
In order to issue the TIF bonds, they have to have an income greater than 1.25% of the development. And you can get all this information from King County at the tax office, which we have.
Yeah, the comptroller report from July of this year that I pointed out, attachment D at the end, there is no funding available yet in TIF 5. The city of Shonin anticipate each will incur additional costs exceeding hundreds of thousands of dollars in FY 2018. And this is the TIF 5 summary, and there it is, $16 million debt service on future bonds, and it's called a deficit for $16 million.
All right, I'm going to start with Carl and Sylvia and Devon. So it seems that unhappiness with the city's decision regarding One Washington and Prairie State should result in challenges to the aldermen who supported these decisions and not attacking them. Comments?
Well, I have been attending the council meetings since long before home rule, and I have stood up. I could give you documentation of all the things I've said. I've reviewed the Trotter study. I pointed out problems with the Trotter study. I pointed out that the Trotter study recommended way back in 2006 that the storm sewers be separated, and Bill McGrath, who was the city administrator at the people up on Blaine Street and Mortimer Street and over on Woodland Hills Road having their basements in 2015, there was 355 homes that had water in their basements below level. And that's all documented. You can look it all up. I can give you the documentation. I have it all. You know, it wasn't just the One North Washington project. It is all of this stuff that goes on and on and on. And when we had for a while, we had good council members for a while, but it seems like every time we elect a good council member and they resign, the city council appoints one that is going to vote for what they want instead of what the people want. We really don't have the greatest representation.
And when there's only one person, when it's uncontested, when most of the races are uncontested, we don't have a choice. And like Yvonne said, when the ones who are elected are replaced with appointed aldermen, we really don't have a lot of say in any of their decisions.
Jim, do you have some? Want me to read the question again?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it seems that unhappiness with the Washington project and the Prairie State project should result in challenges to the aldermen, rather than who supported these projects, rather than attacking home rule.
Right, and part of this is it gets down to why we're here, right? We're here about home rule. Not here about a decision that happened in 2007, over 10 years ago, 11 years ago? I mean, I moved in 2005, barely knew what was going on. 2007, I got my electricity bill went up. What's happening? Right? So I looked at it. Again, I'm going back 11 years, or 10 years, right? My aldermen were great at the time. Bad decision, Prairie State, nothing to do with home rule. I want to say that explicitly, nothing to do with home rule, okay? So we're not allowed to run for office, not be representing anybody, and just keep a running list in our heads of all the things people have done wrong over the years. Quite frankly, the administration's done a great job. So we've had some fantastic aldermen, as they're alluding to. I choose to see the good, not the bad. Okay? New Bridge is great. Community safety is awesome. Our police force is uncontested as far as excellence goes. We have some great fire. They've done some awesome projects. I love the sculptures on the bridge, right? I love some of the development. I love the library, right? All those things at one point people were fighting against, right? So the question is, what perspective do you choose to have? Do you always want to go back to the past and re-baseline yourself on what pissed you off 10 years ago, right? It's not relevant. We're talking about home rule in 2018. It's just not. Okay? We talk about what East Washington. Gonna happen anyways. Home rule, with or without, it's happening. It's an empty field. We need something there. We need that tax revenue. It doesn't provide tax revenue to help us offset our property taxes, right? It's nothing, right? We have to have a positive outlook, appreciate the good governance and the transparency we do have. We are highly represented. One alderman per 2,000 people versus one alderman per 17,000 people in Naperville. And we choose to ignore that and focus on the negative. So I'm going to focus on the positive. I'm going to say they did a great job. I'm going to say they're human. They made mistakes. Let's learn from those mistakes and move on. We have to redevelopment. No way around it. We have to fill in our empty fields downtown. And I'm done.
Okay. Back to you all. So voting participation is low, especially in non-presidential elections. What evidence supports the proposition that voters will monitor government more rigorously if home rule is eliminated? If there's evidence, I suppose.
Well, one of the reasons we put home rule on the ballot was to give the people a choice and get people involved. And I've been saying for as many years since I've been 21 and able to vote, that we need to have more than 10, 11, or 20% of the people determining what 100% of us will pay for. Regardless of how you vote, you need to get out and vote, and there are no guarantees. We're doing our best. We have taken up our time, as the council members have, and as the school board members have. We have taken our time, we've gone to council meetings, we reviewed the meetings, we watch them on BATV when we can't go to the council. So we're involved. And one of the reasons we do this is to try to get people involved, to get them interested, instead of them coming to us and saying, we want to leave Batavia because the taxes are too high. Well, by golly, get off your duff and do something. That's,
And we set up a website, Cadence for Responsible Government, You get on our email list, and we will send emails to you when there's things happening in the city or the school district that we think you would want to know about. So you can keep an eye on that and try to keep your elected officials accountable. And when that doesn't work, we have referenda. You can guarantee that anybody will be watching, and I will be watching for matters that could be put to referendum if there were no home rule, that you people could have the people of Batavia could have a say in.
This might be a moment just to say the city wants you to believe gloom and doom and the sky is falling. The sky is not falling. We will still have our streets plowed, clean water, sewage, electricity, excellent fire and police, and ambulances on either side of the river. The sky is not falling. This is just about, we get the coastline on the checks for the big ticket items.
Voting participation is low. What evidence supports the proposition that voters will monitor government more rigorously if home rule is eliminated?
Well, I like the phrase "get off your duff and do something" because I definitely have more than anyone in this room. Okay, so what I mean when I say that is that I saw what we could lose by losing home rule, right? It bothers me that we're viewing this as a negative conversation. Home rule has been a boon to Batavia. It's helped us with our quality of life. It's helped us have more efficient spending of the tax dollars and how we tax people. It's helped us provide better services for our community. And quite frankly, when I say get off your duff, I mean, I saw us losing the crime-free housing program, and I used to live in a neighborhood that needed the crime-free housing program. So when I saw that was at risk, the first thing I did, my wife can attest, I bought a bunch of crazy yard signs just 3 months ago. Like, guys, we got to do something, got to prevent this. So people need to vote because you need to understand that these decisions are big and they're going to impact you and your family. And more importantly, they're going to impact your safety of you and your children. It's going to impact how much you're taxed when you're taxed. Taxes have gone down some years with home rule. We're not hearing that. They're not saying that. It has. Because we've had better tax options with home rule. And it's been used judiciously. And past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. So we have people watching the city council, which is good. We have people watching the watchers like me, which is good. Right? So everyone wants the city to do better. Everyone wants the community to do better. We're all here participating. And the support we need from folks, just vote. Vote intelligently and vote for yourselves and vote for your family. And get all the information before you do this.
So if approved, Batavia would lose local control and would be subject to greater regulation by the state of Illinois. Is it ever good to give up local control?
Now, that phrasing of the question is not exactly accurate. The control that the state exercises, the state always has power to control, and their power in home rule is to delegate power. Do they give the power to the city council with home rule to make all the decisions, or do they give the power to the people to take part in the decision making and to put things to referendum? Now, without home rule, there are regulations that put safeguards. The state puts safeguards for the people, limits and caps on taxing and spending and new taxes that can be created. And that's not, I see that as a positive. I like to see the safeguards in place. I like to have a say in my government and whether or not I want my taxes to go up or whether I want them to spend things on that are non-essential.
I don't think we're being negative. We've lived here 30 years and maybe lived here a long time more. We're retired here. Home rule is just about trusting the city with a blank check. All businesses have controls and limits based on what they want to spend, some requiring stockholder approval. We are the taxpayers and stockholders. Eliminating home rule just means on any big ticket item, the taxpayers are footing the bills and want to be co-signers of those big checks. And it's not, what would you say, handcuffing the city. It's just like with our alternate referendum. We had to go out and get 1,200 signatures to get a referendum vote. They can sit in their cushy council chambers and just pass and say, we want a referendum to raise this tax or raise that tax. They're not handcuffed. They can do whatever they need to do. The power is there.
And taxes have not gone down in Batavia. They have increased, and I can prove it.
already?
What's right next to me?
So, the local control issue. So, if approved, Batavia would lose local control, and it would be subject to greater regulation by the state. So, is it ever good to give up local control?
Right. So first off, again, getting my earlier point, home rule is a good to Batavia. Local control is a good thing. We passed legislation that's helpful to the community. It's happening. There's no debate about it. It's happening. Talk about taxes. The city's 8% of your property taxes. Let's say property taxes gone up. Talk about school board. Talk about park district. Talk about library. Or are they talking about Civic? Right? You got to keep that in mind because that's a way we talk about this unless it's kind of squirrel in a point without really making one. Right? So we're talking about the city. We talk about the 1,200 signatures. Quite frankly, I distributed 165 signs. 15 of them were folks who signed that petition. They were like, I signed what? Right? And then they found out and they asked for a sign to retain homeowners. So we got to pretend that we have this large informed audience who's making these qualified decisions. That's why we need to do these things, so we can tell people, hey, here's what you got from home rule. Here's what you're going to lose, right? You're going to lose local control. You don't think that's a big deal? Well, then all I'm going to tell you is, guys, I mean, we all lived here for a long time. We remember what it's like for you. We remember watching the 20 police cars per day going to apartment buildings. We remember things like these endless debates over going to referendum over crazy stuff, right? And what homeowners allow us to do is people who are informed, people who devote the time, people who volunteer, who get all the information, they get to make the right choices. And they don't do dumb stuff like pass the soda pop tax. They don't do dumb stuff like pass a lumber tax. What they do is they've been able to use it judiciously to both offset our taxes to help those who are not in Batavia pay, while at the same time take on these big projects that we have to do to help redevelop our community. So we're prepped and primed to attract the new core audience in 2020, even though we're 150 years old. Thank you.
So can you cite an instance where Batavia has abused home rule?
Well, they have raised gas taxes. They borrowed money without our permission. And even though they can do things without home rule, the same things that they say they can do with them, the problem we have is future bonding. And we don't have the power to say no if the city wants to bond. They've got $70 million of capital projects sitting out there that they want approval for. And we will have no say in it as long as they have home rule. And he can say, we have to do this stuff. I don't have a problem with development in Batavia. I have a problem with paying developers to develop Batavia. Why aren't they paid? This is a capitalist society. Why are we, the taxpayers, helping developers build? If they want to build, why don't they pay? Why do we have to subsidize the taxpayers? Shodine has a whole lot more money than I do, and than probably you do. So why do we have to give him benefits? And also, we keep losing businesses. We've lost a lot of businesses in Batavia, and we pay a contractor to bring business to Batavia, and we still keep losing business.
And we've spent over $4 million on the Shodine project, and that comes from, there's no money coming in from that TIF district from Shodine's project right now, so that's coming out of yours and my tax dollars. So that would be a use of what they've done with home rule. And when they have unlimited sources of funding, there's no reason to control, no reason to prioritize spending.
I'm not sure if I should ask you this question, but
Please do.
Is there an example of Batavia using home rule?
You know what? I'm going to say I have examples of Batavia abusing governance without it, right? I mean, abuse happens regardless of what structure of governance you're under. That's just reality of life. It's made of humans, right? I mean, people make mistakes, they do dumb stuff, right? So we have a tool. It's called an election. So when somebody does something dumb, you just vote them out. We did that at the Prairie State. What was it, 2009? We got rid of half the city council. Half. One election, gone. You did dumb stuff, get out. We already did, right? That's our tool. That's how we get rid of people who get information, who make decisions, they make a dumb one, that's how we get rid of them, through an election. We've done it. We talk about Chodine. It's a $40 million project. Chodine's parking a ton of money. And trust me, that thing loses, they're paying the loss, okay? Talk about 16 million, okay? So 16 million, I want to say, is what we're funding them through the TIF bonds, okay? 4 million for a city parking garage, okay? Because quite frankly, the parking garage we have was built, I don't know when it was, back in the 80s, okay? Not going to live in the building on top of it, we have to build a new one, right? So we're paying for a city parking garage that we'll all use, right? Again, it's an empty field, right? That whole area we talked about earlier, it was in the market for like 10 years. No one bought it. They did an RFQ, right? The proposals they got were crap, right? So the question becomes, we need a legitimate developer here. So they found one, Chodine. It's a trigger word, Chodine. They always say Chodine. They don't say Batavia Enterprises. Want to know why? Because I like Batavia Enterprises. I like it too, right? Chodine, I like Chodine too. We find a qualified developer to build on the project, a public-private partnership to make it happen, and it's going to fill a non-tax revenue generating field. More to the point of this conversation, it has nothing to do with home rule. Thank you.
Can we come back to that? So my next question is, are there any Northern Illinois, Chicago suburb communities that have ended home rule? And if so, what has been their impact?
I know Westmont, it was the most recent one in 2014 to end home rule. And I know people who live there. I asked them what the difference has been since they ended home rule, and they said, was there a drop in service? And they said no. And I not reminded her about the referendum to remove home rule. She said she wouldn't have noticed the difference. There's also Lombard and Villa Park and Rockford, and there's one in Missing. I don't remember which one that was. Because there are 5 communities that have removed home rule by referendum. And they're all okay. The people from Rockford that came and spoke at our meeting that we had said that they are better off without home rule. And some of you might say Rockford's not someplace you would like to live, but Rockford had a lot of problems before home rule. Rockford has problems now, and it's not because of home rule. Just like Chicago. Chicago is home rule. Would you want to live in certain parts of Chicago? It's not due to the home rule.
I don't think we mentioned it, but there are 2 cities without home rule have the highest bond rating in the state, Lake Zurich and Clarendon Hills. So any discussion that it's going to affect the bond rating is wrong, because 2 cities proved it wrong. And I just quickly say, the sky is not falling. The only difference between what you can and can't do with home rule is a 6-month referendum cycle. The council can vote. They don't have to get signatures. They can say, we want this on the referendum, the bond $10 million. 6 months later, it's on the ballot for us to decide.
And Clarendon Hills and Lake Zurich, those with the highest bond ratings, they both had referenda in the recent years, and they both rejected home rule because they were too small to get it. They're less than 25,000. They were given an option to vote for home rule, and they voted no home rule.
So are there any Northern Illinois, Chicago communities that have ended home rule, and what was the impact?
So Batavia is part of the Fox Valley, part of the Tri-Cities. So our peers really are Geneva and St. Charles. Okay, that's what we have to patch ourselves up with. We have more representation per citizen than St. Charles or Geneva, so we're highly transparent, and the person's voice gets through. Talking about Westmont, it takes a minute on the internet to look up an article from the Westmont mayor saying it was great to have the ability to, and again, it's not Nancy Dalton, it's like I know someone, it's like the mayor of Westmont talking, right? He says, this gets down to a quality of life issue. You'll hear on the other side of the table a lot of numbers thrown out without talking about quality of life, right? So Westmont talked about the ability to actually apply some crime-free stuff to their apartment complexes. They made some significant difference in the 2 years they had home rule, again, only 2 years, and he was sad to see it go. Okay, so this is not something where government is bad, so get rid of all government, right? Or like things that home rule allows people to go hog wild with judicials. What it allows is like a smart missile. It allows city government to address problems they know they've had for years. So it's not just taxing, which Batavia has done a great job of shifting the tax burden to people who don't live in Batavia. They've done a great job of targeting the problems they know they have with the new tools they have with home rule. So I don't like those questions that say, is there another town in Northern Illinois? Because quite frankly, it's not relevant to us. It's crazy to talk about Rockford in the rest of Batavia. You shouldn't even be in the same breath what we're talking about, right? But Batavia is much nicer than Westland. Not even shouldn't even be in the same breath. We've done a great job with it. It's a tool we have. It's a tool we should keep on using. And we should always watch our city council. We should always be judicious on hawking them what's going on. And finally, if they mess up, we should vote them out because that's our greatest tool.
2 more questions.
So losing home rule would lose a lot of money, and this person estimates it to be $2 to $5 million annually. So what would you cut from the city services to account for that? Okay, Jim.
Well, so I look this way. I have 96 cents on the floor. That's what home rule has cost me every year over the past 9 years, right? The benefits have been much more than 96 cents. 96 cents, less than $1 per year. So I would never get rid of home rule. Wouldn't even occur to me. If I had a city council who was doing dumb stuff, if I had city services that were subpar, I'd vote people out with a fire that would blow your mind. Because that's the tools they need to use. We cannot take tools out of the toolbox because we don't like the tool. The tool is a great tool. We've used it. We should keep home rule. It's been nothing but a good thing for us. That's my answer.
What services would you cut?
First of all, the number 5 million, that number comes from the home rule taxes that they have put in place, that if they do absolutely nothing to try to regain it back, that's what it would be. But there's only $1 million, less than $1 million, that would be permanently lost if we lose home rule. The rest are tied up mostly in sales taxes, and half of that sales tax was approved prior to home rule by referendum. It was put to referendum to pay for bonds for the fire stations. And the people said, yes, we think that's of value. We approved that sales tax. And so that was converted to a home rule sales tax when it became home rule, and that should easily be converted back to a non-home rule sales tax. As for the other 0.5%, that was put in place to help subsidize the electricity costs, and that was only 1 year ago, July 1st, 2017, was when that was changed over to go into the general fund and not go to subsidize the electric fund. So they have not had this tax very long and not in great quantities. And so 1 year is what they had planned. And the gasoline tax that they would lose, that went up $0.01 a year for the last 3 years. So in 2 years, that tax doubled. So it's not like they have depended on these taxes for any length of time, that they're entrenched. And that's the problem. When it gets entrenched, it's harder to remove. If they're not entrenched yet, now's the time to remove it.
And I don't think we need to eliminate services. We have had to pay more for services. We have fees the fees have been increased for water, sewer, and electricity. We have paid those taxes. And if we eliminate this kind of spending for projects that help developers, then we are actually saving tax dollars. So, we don't have to reduce services. We had better services without home rule than we do now.
Last question.
Last question. This person's curious if any outside money funded the debate. So can each group name any organization or individual that contributed more than $100 to your respective groups, or identify how many contributed more than $100?
You know what, I'll go first on this one because my wife's laughing. Okay, so before I answer that, I just want to, because it's the last question. And we don't get any statement, do we? Okay. So,
I'm going to close it out.
You're going to close it, okay. The city's going to lose $1.9 million if we lose home rule. Okay, so what that means, we're going to lose the home rule sales tax. The time between you lose home rule versus when you actually get it on a referendum, assuming it passed, we're going to lose $1.9 million. Okay? Every household has paid 96 cents over the past 9 years due to home rule, 96 cents every year. So it's 22 times the amount you spent more for home rule if you're to lose home rule guarantee. That's regardless of the rest of the conversation. So 22 times more than what you paid for home rule, you're going to pay if you lose it. Just keep that in mind. I paid the entire bill. And the reason why is that it means that much. No one's treated more than $100. I think somebody threw me 30, so thanks. Appreciate it. It didn't make up for the other $3 grand. Right? My wife can attest to it. The reason why is that I lived in a community before home rule that needed the government, that didn't have it. I remember living that day in and day out. It was a nightmare. Okay? Crime-free housing came in, and it was a boom. Things that were a problem vanished within a year. It was amazing. I cannot believe I have to do this. I cannot believe I'm here. Home rule has obviously been the biggest bang for the buck this community has ever received or ever will receive ever. And I need you to all keep that in mind when you hear this gibberish. Okay? You're going to lose 22 times what it's cost you to have home rule, guaranteed. You're going to lose the crime-free housing program, which has dramatically increased your quality of life. And finally, you're going to lose representation and options that you have enjoyed over the past 9 years. You are living in a crime-free community. When you lose it, it will shock you. It won't shock you the day after, it won't shock you the week after, it'll shock you when you have your first problems and you realize the tools that you have are not there.
So contributions to your,
We try to keep our campaign bare bones. We don't have full color signs. We don't have pizza parties. We don't have ads on Facebook. We do what we can with the little money that we do have. And we don't come anywhere close to meeting the threshold for reporting for campaign funding. It's just a handful of people doing what they can to help our cause. And you talk about the taxes, there's a whole lot more than property taxes that goes into home rule. And the taxes they're talking about losing are not property taxes. They're sales taxes. And so we pay those sales taxes, you pay those sales taxes, and the gasoline taxes every time you go fill up your car, every time you go shopping. And every time you pay taxes and fees on this water, sewer, electric, they're always going up per year. So there's a whole lot more. The city has much more income than property tax to take into consideration.
Crime-free housing is like a statement of facts, not evidence. We heard it at the forum, we saw all the graphs, crime was going down, and what the city could do was violation of the law, violation of the law, violation of the law. They could do that without crime-free housing. Crime-free housing is like what they do in Washington. When the Park District is told the budget is going to be cut, they say, well, we're going to close the Washington Monument. So this is their big rallying flag, is crime-free housing. And it just doesn't wash as an argument.
And my final statement about that is, why doesn't your council trust you to give them what they need if they ask you permission? We voted for a sales tax. You don't get a chance to vote on other things. Why shouldn't they trust you?
Now it's my turn. Public service announcement. The League of Women Voters Education Fund put this on today. You talk about contributions. We usually look for free venues. This was not a free venue. We paid Park District rates for this. So we're looking for contributions. League of Women Voters, lwvckc.org, Education Fund. On that note, I would like to thank all of the panelists for participating in this. I thought it was very informative. And you were well behaved. I will tell you, I went to the governor's forum a couple weeks ago that the league put on with ABC7, and I was sort of disappointed in the behavior that was exhibited by two grown men that are vying to run our state. Hard to take. I would like to thank Miriam Judar, who was an excellent moderator, and I'd like a round of applause for her. And what the league wants you to do is vote. So thank you very much.